Today we're going to talk about buyer agency. Specifically, when is the right time to present it, and should it be in the first 35 seconds of meeting a new buyer? Hey Jennifer, my broker requires that I get a signed buyer agency agreement before I take a buyer out to look at houses. I'm not really comfortable with this, but everyone says I'll get burned if I don't. What do you suggest? Well, first things first. If it is your broker's policy that you get a signed agency agreement prior to going out with a buyer to look at houses, then I guess you'll get a signed buyer agency agreement prior to going out to look at houses, if indeed that is the broker policy. I do find that some real estate agents confuse the two, and they believe that the broker's policy or the state law that you have a conversation about agency up front is the same thing as getting a buyer agency agreement signed, and that's not the case. I found that some real estate agents confuse the policy or even the state law that you have to get an agency disclosure signed with a policy or law that you have to get a buyer agency agreement signed. So just make sure that you're sure what it is that the broker policy is in this situation. Now, one more thing before I answer the question. State agency laws vary significantly across state lines. I practiced real estate in Colorado, and I just assumed that agency laws were the same everywhere, but they're not. So anything that I say today, anything that I advise today, just make sure to run it through your own understanding of your state's agency laws. All right, so here's my opinion on the matter of getting a signed buyer agency agreement in the first 35 seconds of meeting a new buyer. I think it's ridiculous. I need to prove myself to a buyer before I insist that they commit to me. And frankly, I'd like to get to know the buyer a little bit before I commit to them, which remember, a buyer agency agreement works both ways. But I feel like a new buyer has every right to evaluate me before committing to me. Do I know what I'm doing? Do I return my phone calls promptly? Or maybe I have 25 other buyers taking up my time right now. The buyer has the right to spend a little bit of time with me and decide if I'm the right woman for the job. And I don't have any problem with that. And if he's a flake, a piece of paper isn't going to change anything there. You know, we in the real estate industry get all fired up about, I'm not going to put a buyer in my car until they've signed a buyer agency agreement. I don't want to waste my time showing a buyer around who's not going to be faithful to me. Come on, guys, give it a minute. All right, let's build the relationship. Let's decide if we're even a good fit for each other. But you know what a buyer wants when they come to see a real estate agent for the first time? Do you think they want to sit in the office and have a 2-hour conversation about agency and loan approval, which we'll talk about here in a little bit? No. They're excited about going out to look at houses. They want to go find their dream home. So let's do that. There's plenty of time to talk about buyer agency, to talk about how we actually get paid. But let's go build a relationship. Let's build a rapport. Let's go have some fun together before we have these deep conversations. And you know what else? If you don't push buyer agency on a new buyer, if you don't even bring it up except as you're required to by law, maybe just have the conversation about what agency is, but if you don't push it on them, you know what? You're going to be a breath of fresh air to that buyer, because probably every other real estate agent they're talking to is pushing them for buyer agency, is probably pushing them for loan approval. And here you are saying, hey, let's go look at houses. Let's go have some fun. Then at some point, while you're out there having all this fun looking at houses, you can have the buyer agency discussion at the right time. But it doesn't have to be in the first 35 seconds of meeting, unless, of course, that is your broker's policy. Then I guess you will. But I'll tell you, you will get more loyal buyers by not insisting on loyalty than you will if you bring them in, sit them down, and give them a speech about buyer agency. So let me answer the second part of the question now. Won't I get burned if I don't get a buyer agency agreement signed? Won't my buyer be tempted to cheat on me and go use the services of some other real estate agent, or go to a for sale by owner, or go to a builder and I don't get paid? I mean, sure, I guess that might happen, but Most of the time, if you're proving yourself to the buyer, if the buyer likes you, if the buyer trusts you, if the buyer is impressed with your responsiveness and your expertise and you know how wonderful you are, they're not going anywhere else. And you can certainly have the conversation about how you get paid. It just doesn't have to go hand in hand with a requirement to sign a buyer agency agreement. So what's the punchline here? Just relax. Don't worry about the buyer agency agreement in the first 35 seconds. Go out with your buyers, have some fun with them, build the relationship. You can have the buyer agency conversation at the right time. So what did you think of my answer? Does this sound like an approach to real estate you can get excited about? If so, there is so much more at my website, sellwithsoul.com. Thanks.